with this deployment of having the ICE officers, quote unquote, on patrol, that's different. That's a different animal altogether.
If you think that being a parent is the greatest and most important job you're ever going to do, but you also fully understand that it's filled with challenges and headaches too, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Dad's All In podcast. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Dad's All In show. I'm excited to have a special guest. My good friend Will Bordley, Chief Will Bordley, is going to be on with us tonight to talk with you in a couple minutes about, keeping your kids out of the trouble with the law. Your teenagers, your kids, even some advice on what you can do to help your kids sift through the idea of if they're approached by law enforcement or ICE agents. A few weeks back, I had someone in the audience reach out to me. They wanted to go anonymous, so I'll just say shout out to them because they had concerns about some of the things that were happening with law enforcement agents across the country, and they specifically had mentioned ICE agents, and this young lady has teenagers. How do they approach working with law enforcement if they're approached by law enforcement? And we're going to dive into all that and more. I am fortunate enough to have Will Bordley on with me today, good friend of mine. I thought if I'm going to have to handle this kind of question, which is not my expertise by any stretch of the imagination, I know a guy. Will, thank you so much for jumping on with me, man.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. Pleasure to be here, man.
So let me give you a little bit of background, kind of run down a quick bio of Will so you can know he's got so much experience behind him. So he started off as a former police officer, Smyrna, Delaware, and then he became the chief of police, which is interesting because he was the first African American to actually hold that position, which is amazing. He also became the first community policing officer, the first school DARE officer, and also the first school resource officer in conjunction with his work with the school systems. Currently, he's the department chair of the criminal justice program at Delaware Tech. And just last month, he was selected as the honorary commander in 2026 for the Delaware State Police. Man, you got a whole list of things you've accomplished in your career, my friend. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Kyle, I think you covered the highlights of it. I've been a lifelong Delawarean, growing up and graduating from Smyrna High School, and I attended Delaware State University and Wilmington University. I have a bachelor's in criminal justice, a master's in public administration. I'm a graduate of the FBI NA National Academy in Quantico. I know a little bit about how the federal government works, and with my experience there at the academy and here at home with our partners in law enforcement, DEA, FBI, and the like, those types of agencies here. So a big part of my background, as you covered, is dealing with children and working with children and kids. I have two children of my own, one adult son and a teenage daughter that I'm still raising. In my life now as a college instructor, I still work with a lot of young men and women to help mold them into being productive officers, hopefully in their future.
I can attest, as your office is right next to mine, I get to witness firsthand not just the great work that you and the criminal justice program does, but also the great connections you have with the students who are in your program. I've always admired that about you all. You do a great job connecting with them and really kind of pointing them in the right direction and giving them support in their whole journey. Let's talk a little bit about, this is kind of broad, Will, but you can go wherever you want to with this. Some advice for parents that maybe they've got worries, like maybe it's just very immediate worries, but also maybe down the line that they want to make sure that their kid is making good choices. They want to make sure that their child never runs into, or hopefully doesn't run into, any trouble with the law. Do you want to dive into just some general advice that might help them out?
Sure. And my hope is that what I say sounds simplistic, right? I hope that my comments, parents will take it as, oh, I knew that. I knew that all along. What Chief Bordley just said isn't rocket science, and I hope that's the case. One of the things that come to my mind at first is give kids the attention they deserve. All right, they want to be seen, and that's anyone in life. We as parents, we're working so hard to give our kids everything. We have to take the time to give them ourselves, get them involved, keep them motivated. There are so many things for kids to do. Keep them active. Make sure that they're involved in sports, music, dance, whatever it may be. One of my things in my past life was I helped institute the Police Athletic League. And part of the reasoning behind that was to get those kids off of our streets and have them do something, some extracurricular activities to keep them active. And one thing about that program, which I loved, our biggest program, we had football, we had basketball, and we had tennis, but basketball wound up being the biggest draw. And I'm proud to say that that program is still up and running in Smyrna, and it's great. And I love it because I noticed that not only were the kids in the community involved, but the kids that weren't even playing basketball, filling up the gym to watch their friends play. And every Saturday, I used to go into that gym usually around 7 in the morning, and I wouldn't leave until 6 at night for 12, 13 weekends straight, whatever it was back then. And the gym was just constantly packed from the moment we opened the doors to the time they left. And I was in awe because they could be out doing who knows what, right? But those kids, the ones playing and the ones who were just there cheering their friends on, they were there inside, staying out of trouble. That's what gave me the greatest joy, to watch that and see that come to fruition, and to know that that program is still up and running. There's some great people still there, police officers that are involved. Wonderful job. So things like PAL, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, your local libraries have programs, summer camps, Parks and Rec. All of these are options that parents can get their kids into or drive them towards to keep them active and busy. So give your children first you, give them yourself, give them your time, your attention. Children really do seek advice and structure. They may not always take it or use it, right? But they do seek it. So give them that opportunity, give them that advice, give them that structure, keep them active. And then the third and final thing that I would say is involve yourself into their activity. My son, he was really into like Dragon Ball Z, and I could not wrap my head around this Dragon Ball Z. I'm like, don't you like DC and Marvel comics like your dad? I'm a DC Marvel guy, and I really like that stuff. But he grew up into that Dragon Ball Z stuff, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be a Dragon Ball Z guy. I got into it, right? I got into what he got into it. We bonded over that. We bonded over that. My son was involved in ROTC, and I went to everything that he was involved in with ROTC while he was in school. And that serves two purposes, right? First thing is that it supports them. It means a lot to have a parent in the stands cheering them on. When they look around, they're looking for mom or dad or grandmom or granddad or aunt or uncle, someone who's there to watch them perform at whatever it is that they have taken the time to put these efforts into. And then the second thing is it drives off predators. Anyone who may prey on your children, they don't want parent involvement. They look for predators, unfortunately, in our world. They look for kids that are quote unquote cast off,
Hmm.
that aren't being paid attention to. So with the parent involvement, you're doing two things. You're supporting your child and you're warding off predators without even knowing it.
That is interesting stuff, Will. And our listeners know I constantly am saying, my philosophy is be a role model, be supportive, be active, and be present. But I hadn't really thought too much about it from that perspective. That is a different mindset altogether. And you're right. If there's family around, if there's friends around, you don't look as vulnerable, right? I hadn't thought about the idea of you being a target otherwise. That is interesting. I want to go back just a second and reiterate exactly what you'd said about being active. It doesn't matter what your child is into, what your teenager is into. I mean, as long as it's ethical. And like you said, it could be they're into Dragon Ball Z. It could with my son. It's always been Pokemon, and tried to wrap my head around it. It doesn't necessarily mean you are like become an expert in it, but if you show some interest in whatever they're interested in, it can make a difference. And the idea of getting them active into the community, and it doesn't have to be just sports. Sports are definitely an amazing outlet, and we always talk a lot about that.
Hmm.
But it could also be theater. It could be music groups. Could be youth groups of some kind. Any kind of organization where your son or daughter gets opportunities to get out and experience things with other people is super powerful. I want to dive a little bit into the law enforcement side of things and pick your brain a little bit on it. So let's start here. And this one kind of goes along with our what we're going through as a society. There's been a lot of challenges in society over the last so many months. So if your child or teenager is approached by law enforcement, whether it be police officers, ICE agents, any advice on how your kids should go about approaching that situation?
Yes, I have to say that I've given this advice on a personal level myself, growing up as a young black male teenager. My son growing up as a young black male teenager. My daughter, she drives now. My own family members and friends, and then just in my professional settings, right? Going into classrooms and students asking me or questions. I get hit with these things all the time. What should I do when I get pulled over or when I get stopped? So one of the first things, and again, I hope and I pray that my goal is that this sounds simplistic, but the first thing is stay calm as possible. Because let's face it, no one likes being pulled over by police. Period. Myself included. I'm a retired police officer. I'm a police chief. I know from the outset, if I do something wrong, I'm going to cooperate with the police, and we're just going to have a conversation, and we'll do what I have to do. But it's still uncomfortable for myself, right? So stay calm. Stay calm. Don't do anything that would seem to be an outburst or give pause to the officer to get to a higher level. And when I say higher level, is that officers are trained to respond at a higher level than the person they're dealing with. There's a force continuum
Hmm.
that officers are trained to follow. So we don't meet. We're not going to sit there if someone's arguing and yelling at us. We're not going to sit there and argue and yell with them. We're going to deal with that problem. We're going to deal with that issue. We're going to stop you from arguing and yelling with us. We're not going to be on the side of the road having a back and forth. That's not going to happen. They're trained to address the situation. So remain calm, no sudden actions or outbursts. Be respectful. Be respectful to the officer. The men and women behind that badge, they are trying to make a living for themselves and their families. They're just doing their job the best they can. By and large, the large majority of officers go out, 90% do their job the right way every day, and we never hear anything about them. It's only the times that something goes wrong where the handful of officers, a very small percentage of officers, does something erroneous that it makes front page news and makes the whole profession look bad.
Right.
So you just have to look at it from that perspective. Think there's thousands and thousands of officers, but it's only the one, two, three, four, five that do something erroneous that make them all look bad. So you may not be agreeable to the situation at the time, but keep in mind that that person wants to go home and see their family at the end of the day too, and that's all they're trying to do and get through their day. And finally, comply with the officer, be complicit. There are times that officers are wrong. They're only human, but comply at the moment. Honestly, in the grand scheme of things, this is a minor inconvenience on your behalf as a person. You're going to be temporarily held, hopefully not. You may be taken into custody under false pretenses. Hopefully that's few and far between, but that's an extreme example. But all of these things will come out at the end of the day. All of you'll get to have your opportunity to be heard, seen, and released and let go. So from a traffic ticket, it's a minor inconvenience, right? You're gonna be pulled over. You're gonna talk to the officer 10, 15 minutes, and you'll be on your way. No matter what happens in that situation, it's aggravating and it's tense, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a minor inconvenience for a temporary period of time. So just stay calm, be respectful, comply, and then we can move on with our life.
So those are great points, Will. And I'll say this, you're 100% right. Like the things that get highlighted are when officers maybe they make poor decisions. There are people who have poor performance in any industry, in any job. You know, my background in education, I can tell you there are some teachers that start and then maybe they don't even make it 1 year. There are people who work at your local grocery market and maybe they struggle there. So the ones that you see on the news or the ones you'll see scrolling on your social media, if they're making poor choices, they obviously give the law enforcement a bad rap overall. The other thing I would say is that if you get pulled over and listen, this isn't necessarily my wheelhouse, but I would imagine just knowing how behavior works and my background working with youth with behavioral needs, if you escalate yourself, you're probably more likely to end up in a bad situation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I've been in so many situations, I pull someone over and before I could get out of my car, because officers are generally poking on the radio, giving their locations and descriptions of the vehicle and people inside before they even approach it. People jumping out of the car before I even walk up to it.
Oh goodness.
That's, and that's not good, right?
Right.
It's that type of behavior. Or when I walk up to them, and I'm not going to use the same language, but walk up to them and say, hey, what the bleepity bleep you stopping me for? And we're just getting off on that wrong foot just initially. And people forget, police officers are people, just like in any public service field, like teaching. We do take all of that in. We may not show it all the time to the public, but we do take that in. We're not robots. We're not desensitized. That does affect us. And I think, if any officers that are listening, it does affect you. You are taking it. And the officers today are doing much better than in my time. Officers today are a lot more aware. They're conscious of their feelings and how to deal with that. It's a lot better environment than it was when I was working. A lot of times we just internalize stuff, take it on the chin, and move on. And that led to a lot of bad things in law enforcement officers' lives: drinking, domestic abuse, a lot of issues. Things have come a long way for the better, and officers today are more conscious of that, and that makes them better officers when they go out and perform their duties.
That's well said. And I can only imagine the level of stress. The level of stress every day when you're on the job. Your every day is a little different and you always have to be prepared for anything that gets thrown at you. So I don't know if I put myself in your shoes and it's a typical, highway stop, but the person is aggressive, maybe not even physically, just verbally. Like that creates another layer of challenge. So
Absolutely.
so I guess my advice, audience, in specifically to the mom who reached out to me, is maybe have some discussions with your daughter and son about exactly what Will's talking about and how they approach when they are approached by law enforcement. Let's take a turn here a little bit, Will, and I'd be remiss if I didn't get your input on this particular topic because it's the hot topic of the last few months. Obviously, the challenges that have been faced by a lot of communities as ICE officers, federal agents have come in, and as they're working with, trying to find people who are here maybe illegally. What kind of advice do you have? What are your general thoughts about everything and how it's affecting people and community and anything else that you'd like to share about the topic in general?
So that's a great question, and I don't think there's any true answer to that, a correct answer to it or for it. But I will say this: police agencies are the actual arm of the government, whether it's local, state, or federal. We act under the direction of that authority. As an example, for me, working in the town of Smyrna, I answer to the town council, the mayor and town council, and I also answer to the state of Delaware and the United States of America. I took an oath to uphold all of those laws and ordinances. that were put into place. So I don't want to appear to be a hypocrite because I'm not. I totally understand that I was in service to do a job, and that was to protect everyone. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing is I know a lot of federal agents, ICE, DEA, FBI, fine, educated, smart people, and they signed on, like myself, to do a specific job. They signed on to enforce immigration laws, or signed on to do drug enforcement work, or signed on to do crime follow up for robberies or homicides or things of that nature. So I've had great working relationships with those folks, and I found them to be awesome. So, in the case of the ICE agents specifically, how I see it is as these fine people are working for their designations, but in their designated area, but they're not being deployed properly. And not to say they can't be, but that's not totally what they signed on before. Historically, what happens when an officer comes across, and I've had this myself, I will come across someone who's here illegally, who doesn't have proper identification or anything like that, and we would call ICE to come in and deal with them at that point. It's out of my hands. I would charge them with whatever crime I had for them. ICE would come in and they would take it from there. And that's typically how it worked in the past. There was a great working relationship between local and state agencies with the federal agencies through MOUs or task force, because that's what generally happens. Federal agencies come into a state and they start developing relationships with the state and local agencies, and they work together. With this deployment of having the ICE officers, quote unquote, on patrol, that's different. That's a different animal altogether.
Hmm.
So it's asking the ICE agents to come in, and now instead of working with these agencies, you're out patrolling just like your local town police, just like your state troopers. That's totally different than the way they've done business in the past. We here in Delaware, I was trying to, as I'm thinking about it, here in Delaware, we have something called the Governor's Task Force, where probation and parole officers team up with state police officers and they work together, and the state police officers go with the probation and parole officers to their clients' homes as they're doing their visits. And if there is suspected criminal activity, the state troopers then activate and make start to make the arrest. So they're working together in tandem. You wouldn't ask ICE, who is typically waiting for a phone call or doing some type of other proactive work, to come out and patrol a town or city. That's not typical. It would be smarter to work with your local agencies, and by having them deployed into the streets the way that they have been, now you're having these barriers put up with your local and state agencies, because now you're, I don't want to say territorial, but now it's like, okay, we're already here, we're already doing our jobs. Now you guys are coming in and you're patrolling our same streets that we are. Now you're much more visible, which I don't have a problem with, but it's creating a natural barrier between communication between the agencies. You're not working with us now. You're just coming in and trying to take over on your own.
Well, Will, you're dropping some gold here, man. I hadn't even thought of, I hadn't even thought about that. The idea that previously, because ICE has been utilized for decades, and it hasn't been until recently we've seen all of these extra layers of issues. So what you're saying is previously it was usually law enforcement, the police officers would reach out to ICE to bring them in when it was needed, and now they are actually out on patrol themselves.
Yes.
So it is a different situation, different scenario altogether. That's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely. And policing is different. We all enforce the law. We all do essentially the same job, but it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different being a local police officer than it is a state trooper, than it is to be a federal agent, right? That all those jobs, we're all law enforcement, but each job is like a specific job. a local officer knows that they're going to be handling accidents and patrolling and helping kids across the street and all those things. A state trooper knows that they're going to be out in the urban areas patrolling, mainly alone and handling situations and mainly doing, sometimes highway patrol work, a lot of those things. So, and the federal agencies know that they're going to be called out when there's a bank robbery or something. The jobs are specific. And ICE traditionally has been called in to help with these things when we run across immigration issues or identification issues. This is totally different. Find folks that work in the federal government, find folks that work in the federal agencies. They didn't sign on to come out and do patrol work.
Right, right.
I
Not what they had bargained for, right? Like that's probably and to be honest with you, is it even what their training was originally for? Like you do a little bit of diving into some of the things that have happened. We obviously what's happened in Minnesota, but there's been plenty of instances across the country. You hear they've got like their new hires with like 47 days of training or something like that. And I know through conversations with you and the people that you work with around our college, your training to become a police officer is a bit more extensive than that. And so you ask yourself, like, is the training that they're getting anywhere really what you need it to be? And now when you're telling me it's a flip scenario where they're not doing traditionally what they had been doing, do they need more training to actually perform the patrol actions that they're being asked to do?
So I really don't know the answer to that.
Right.
I do know, and I do agree with you that has been an issue that's been raised. I've seen that
Yeah.
obviously on the news about are they appropriately trained for that. I know that they have EVOC training, which is emergency vehicle training, and I know that they have search warrant training and all those types of things. But I know that they get some training on car stops and things of that issue, things of that nature. But this isn't something that they have traditionally done every day, like the local and state officers that do this every day, stopping, detaining in the streets. That's a different ball game.
Yeah.
That's a different ball game, especially when you got eyes on people around. Local and state officers are used to that. They're used to that. They do that every day. I mentioned that earlier in the other questions that you asked about, car stops for teens,
Right. Right.
um, and people
Routine.
getting nervous, and people jumping out of vehicles, people jumping out before I'm even ready for them, but you adjust to that and you get used to that.
Right.
If you're not used to that, that could be a problem.
And you probably react in ways that you shouldn't because you're not prepared for it, which
Absolutely.
that makes sense.
But, as far as their training, you or I, we really don't know all of what the government has or hasn't done. We can only suspect, right, that
Yeah.
they haven't gotten the necessary training to do that. Now, going forward, like anything, we can learn. We can learn from our past mistakes. I love the model of the GTF, Governor's Task Force. It's worked great here in Delaware for many years. I don't see why ICE couldn't partner with their local. If there is an immigration problem in a certain area, why couldn't the ICE agents partner with local agencies
Hmm.
and go out on patrol with them,
Right.
or with state agencies and go out on patrol with them
Hmm.
and encounter these folks and start dealing with that? And if they do encounter an immigration issue, then activate and take care of it.
Man, I have enjoyed this conversation as always, Will. Yeah, as always. Let's finish up on this. I'm gonna kind of circle back, and I think I know your answer to this now. But so let's say, for example, the mom who reached out to me specifically had mentioned ICE agents. If her son or daughter, I try to paint a picture scenario, maybe they're a teenager, and they're approached by ICE agents, they react pretty much the way that you'd mentioned earlier. Do you think?
Being a kid, I know how unsettled, unnerved, and even for adults, like I mentioned, it's
Right.
always unnerving to be approached by law enforcement. And that's natural. That's to be expected. The officers are trained for that. I would advise that mom and that child, hey, you're in this situation, there's the probability that you could be stopped, questioned. Just be as prepared as possible. I would definitely, hopefully, have things in order for the child, whether they're here legally or illegally. If you're here legally, have proper ID in place, remain calm, be respectful, show the identification or whatever it is that you may have to prove that you're here as a legal citizen. Have that at the ready. If you're here illegally, then I definitely would have some type of legal representation on at the ready, but still remain calm, follow the orders, and follow the process.
And there's a common theme throughout everything you've said. Parents don't escalate. So share share that with your kids. Like, don't escalate. And that's gotta be hard because anytime you have a spotlight on you for anything, your anxiety raises. And along with your anxiety comes other emotions. And then if you escalate yourself, then you could end up really getting yourself into worse trouble eventually. Will, thank you so much for this conversation, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Kyle. You're an outstanding guy, outstanding person. The show is named appropriately. Dad's all in. I can vouch for that.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And we'll have to have you back on. Talk about your law enforcement or anything else. You're a worldly man. You've got ideas about all kinds of stuff. Audience, just remember you can always get this on the replay. And if you do, because this is definitely a shareable episode, so think about, is there somebody that you know who would benefit from this conversation? All the gold that Will has dropped for you today, feel free to share it. So thanks again, Will, for your time. I appreciate it. Audience, feel free to reach out to me with any questions you might have. If you need help with anything, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. Be sure to follow me at Dad's All In Podcast on all the socials. You can also email me with any questions that you'd like answered on future shows, or just to provide me with feedback or ideas. Feel free to reach out to my email, dadsallinpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great one, my friend.